Welcome to my last lesson for the Life in the UK test. Before we dive into all the kings, queens, battles and big events, let's talk about why it's worth putting in the effort to actually memorize some of these names and dates. Now, the Life in the UK test is multiple choice, so you might think, I don't need to know the exact years, I'll just recognize the answer when I see it. But here's the tricky bit. Often the options they give you are really similar. Sometimes all four options are things you have heard of. Say, all the year options, like the ones you see on this slide, come up, but them sounding similar isn't quite enough to know which events they relate to. That's why it helps to have certain events and dates properly locked into your memory. If you know the right one with confidence, you won't get caught off by a near miss answer. Let's start by recapping the main eras. Around 10,000 years ago, England was separating from Europe. By around 6,000 years ago, we got the first farmers and settlers. This is part of the Stone Age. Then around 4,000 years ago, we entered the Bronze Age. People began using metal for tools and weapons, giving them an advantage in changing daily life. The Iron Age followed, where stronger iron tools and hill forts became common. Fast forward to 55 BC, Julius Caesar tried to invade Britain, but he failed. In AD 43, another emperor, Claudius, invaded successfully. The Romans built towns, roads, and Hadrian's Wall, and they also brought Christianity. The Romans left around 410, leaving Britain vulnerable. Some important missionaries that spreaded Christianity further were St. Columba, St. Augustine in Canterbury, and St. Patrick. By around AD 600, the Anglo-Saxons had established kingdoms across what we now call England. The most famous Saxon king was Alfred the Great, who united the Anglo-Saxons and pushed back the Vikings. Finally, in 1066, the Middle Ages begin with the Norman conquest at Hastings. The Middle Ages, as we define them in the UK, stretch from 1066 all the way to 1485, when the Battle of Bosworth ended the War of the Roses and began the Tudor era. Now on to the wars. In 1066 there was the Battle of Hastings. This was the last successful invasion of England. The Normans, led by William of Normandy, or William the Conqueror, defeated the Anglo-Saxons and Harold II. William became king, marking the start of Norman rule. In 1284 we got the conquest of Wales. King Edward I defeated the Welsh and passed the Statute of Rhuddlan. This brought Wales formally under English rule. In 1314 there was the Battle of Bannockburn, one of the most famous Scottish victories. Robert the Bruce defeated the English, and Scotland's independence was preserved for centuries to come. Next up, 1337 to 1453, there was the 100 Years' War with France. England fought to keep land on the continent, but ultimately lost most of it. This really ended England's big ambitions in France. From 1455 to 1485, there were the Wars of the Roses. This was a power struggle between the House of York and the House of Lancaster. It ended at the Battle of Bosworth, when Henry VII defeated Richard III. That's the end of the Plantagenet rule and the start of the Tudors. Jumping ahead to the English Civil War from 1642 to 1651. On one side were the Royalists or Cavaliers supporting Charles I, and on the other hand were the Parliamentarians or Roundheads. The Parliamentarians won, Charles I was executed, and the monarchy was temporarily abolished. Then in 1688 there was the Glorious Revolution, where James II was overthrown and Parliament invited William and Mary to rule. This led to the Bill of Rights, which firmly established constitutional monarchy, where Parliament had real power over the crown. And then in 1690, the Battle of the Boyne. James II, with support from France and Irish Catholics, tried to regain the throne. He was defeated by William III, securing Protestant rule in both Britain and Ireland. The Jacobite Rising of 1745 to 1746 was led by Bonnie Prince Charlie, who wanted to restore the Stuart monarchy. The British government defeated him at the Battle of Culloden, and this marked the end of any serious attempt to bring the Stuarts back to the throne. Then we jump forward to 1805 and the Battle of Trafalgar. Admiral Nelson led the British Navy against Napoleon's French and Spanish fleets. Britain won a decisive victory, securing control of the seas and preventing Napoleon from invading. Nelson himself was killed in the battle, but he became a national hero. Just 10 years later, in 1815, we had the Battle of Waterloo. Here Britain and its allies, led by the Duke of Wellington, finally defeated Napoleon for good. This was a turning point. Napoleon was sent into permanent exile, and Britain emerged as one of the world's leading powers. Fast forward to the First World War, 1914 to 1918. Britain and its allies fought against Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. The war caused massive loss of life, reshaping Europe, and also brought big changes at home. Finally, the Second World War, 1939 to 1945. Britain and its allies, including the USA and the Soviet Union, fought against Nazi Germany, Italy, and Japan. Britain survived the threat of invasion, enduring the Blitz, and was part of the Allied victory. After the war, Britain saw major social changes. Let's look at the key political turning points in British history. These were the milestones where laws, government, and rights really changed. In 1215, the Magna Carta. King John was forced to sign this document. The key principle was that even the king must obey the law. The idea, no one is above the law, is still fundamental today. In 1284, the Statute of Rhuddlan, as already mentioned. This brought Wales formally under English control. From here on, Wales was ruled as part of England. In 1534, there was the Protestant Reformation. This was when Henry VIII broke away from the Roman Catholic Church because he wanted a divorce. He declared himself head of the Church of England, and that's where the Church of England started. Then in 1660, the Restoration. Remember, Charles I had been executed and Cromwell ruled as Lord Protector. But after Cromwell's death, the monarchy was restored with Charles II. In 1689, the Bill of Rights was signed by William and Mary after the Glorious Revolution. This established that Parliament, not the monarch, held the real power. That's the birth of constitutional monarchy. In 1707, there was the first Acts of Union. England and Scotland joined to create Great Britain. In 1801, Ireland joined too, creating the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. In 1807, the transatlantic slave trade was abolished. In 1833, slavery itself was abolished fully across the British Empire. After the Second World War, we get one of the biggest social reforms. In 1948, the NHS was founded under Attlee's Labour government. For the first time, universal healthcare was available to all. In 1973, the UK joined the European Economic Community. In 2016, the Brexit referendum was held and people voted to leave. That became official in 2020 when Britain formally exited the EU. In 1707, there was the first Acts of Union. England and Scotland joined to create Great Britain. In 1801, Ireland joined too, creating the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. In 1807, the transatlantic slave trade was abolished. In 1833, slavery itself was abolished fully across the British Empire. After the Second World War, we get one of the biggest social reforms. In 1948, the NHS was founded under Attlee's Labour government. For the first time, universal healthcare was available to all. In 1973, the UK joined the European Economic Community. In 2016, the Brexit referendum was held and people voted to leave. That became official in 2020 when Britain formally exited the EU. Now let's have a closer look at Ireland. As already mentioned, in 1707, England and Scotland came together to form Great Britain, and then in 1801, Ireland was added to create the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. But this union was never entirely smooth, and tensions continued, especially in Ireland, where political and religious divisions ran deep. In 1916, during the First World War, Irish Republicans launched the Easter Rising in Dublin. It was quickly put down, but it had a huge impact. It increased sympathy for Irish independence and convinced many people that the future lay outside of the United Kingdom. By 1921, after the Irish War of Independence, a compromise was reached in the Anglo-Irish Treaty. The South, made up of 26 counties, became the Irish Free State, while the 6 counties in the north, where there was a Protestant majority who wanted to stay in Britain, remained part of the UK as Northern Ireland. This was the moment when Ireland effectively split. But this division did not solve the problem. Many nationalists in the north still felt cut off, living under British rule when they wanted to be united with the rest of Ireland. So, in the 1960s, the unresolved tensions exploded into what we call the Troubles. This was a violent conflict in Northern Ireland between mainly Catholic nationalists who wanted unification with the Republic of Ireland and mainly Protestant Unionists who wanted to remain in the UK. For decades, Northern Ireland experienced bombings, shootings, and deep divisions in daily life. Finally, in 1998, the Good Friday Agreement brought a peace settlement. It didn't change the border. Northern Ireland stayed part of the UK, but it introduced a power-sharing system so that both Unionists and Nationalists had a voice in government. It also guaranteed that Northern Ireland's status can only change if a majority of its people vote for it. In many ways, this was about making do, living with the compromise of 1921, but with a new framework that both sides could accept in order to end the violence. I created this diagram to give a big picture of the royal families across British history. You can see how the crown passed from the Tudors through the Stuarts and then to the Hanoverians, who later gave us Queen Victoria, who married the original Windsor. So you can pause here and have a good look at this family tree. And a slide showing the increase in British population through the centuries. Pause here to have a read through it. For important athletes, actors, directors, movies, musicians, artists, architects, designers, authors, poets, athletes, landmarks, and key politicians, please have a look at the relevant slides, lessons. Thank you so much for joining me in this series of lessons for the Life in the UK test. I hope that it was helpful, and good luck for the test.